All right, everyone. It appears I'm in a new location. Yes, I'm currently in Maryland. Tonight I'll be going on Timcast IRL, so I'm at the hotel room right now. If my audio sounds a little bit funny, that's because I don't have my Blue Yeti microphone with me. I'm just using the Logitech's own built-in microphone. It's good, but it's not quite as refined. It's not quite as sophisticated as a Yeti. Anyway, I look forward to that. But we've got news to talk about. I slept in a little bit, as you may have also noticed, but work calls. Nancy Pelosi. Oh, we've got to talk about Nancy. Making comments about the Gaza protesters, actually. Now, a few days ago, she was saying, well, I want the FBI to investigate these anti-war protesters because they probably have ties to Russia. Some of them probably do. There's plenty of court intrigue in the world. Then the other day, a few of them showed up at her house, right? And they were protesting there and partially blocking her driveway briefly as well, which is hilarious. And her reaction was very, very angry. It's like very indignant. She's a NIMBYist, like all liberals tend to be. The idea is if people are burning down the Wendy's in your ghetto neighborhood, Nancy Pelosi supports it and will say, well, there's some justified grievance there. Don't you dare impede her in getting out of her driveway for 5 minutes. Then she reacted by saying, why don't you go back to China where your headquarters is? That is a quote from Nancy Pelosi. For somebody who talks a big game about how Republicans are bigoted and Trump in specific, he's bigoted and xenophobic. They tried to create that label and largely failed in their propaganda. People sort of rejected the concept. It's very funny to hear her say that now. These Code Pink individuals do have ties with the Communist Party of China. But then again, so does Nancy Pelosi, and so I'm not sure what her problem is. She should have invited him in for tea. If somebody's working for China, then Nancy Pelosi naturally would be their friend and ally until they disturb her. She's never said a goddamn word about these people till they inconvenienced her. I would note that. Secondly, I'm well aware of the Chinese connection to certain leftist groups in the United States that antagonize and harass. That does not mean they do not have the right to protest. It also does not mean that the FBI needs to be weaponized against them simply for inconveniencing Madam Pelosi, which again appears to literally be her impetus here. It's not out of any sort of ideological construct. It's not because Nancy Pelosi gives a shit and she's too busy insider trading to care about most issues that don't involve her explicitly. It appears to be, in her case, more of a literal NIMBYist vendetta, a personal vendetta. How dare you block my vehicle? Well, Nancy, where were you talking about leftoid protesters on border and immigration in general, foreign policies? Certainly the environment. The environmentalist protesters are most notorious for this, or even the Gaza protesters themselves when they were blocking roads to airports and things like that. What did you say about it? Not much, I believe. I don't think that there was much of a dialogue, or rather monologue in her case, from Nancy Pelosi on the issue until they came up her driveway. Standard, rich, NIMBYist liberal. That's the perfect moniker for her. When I saw this, at first I assumed that it was doctored, and that she hadn't actually said what she was professed to have said. It's actually real. And there was a community note on that. I don't know if it stuck on this particular status saying that the video had been edited, and she didn't actually say that. But she did. She said, literally go back to China. Now, imagine that Donald Trump, to a group of protesters, whatever the fucking hell they happen to be protesting, said something like that. Go back to China, go back to Russia, go back to Mexico, etc. What would Nancy Pelosi be the first person to point out? That's bigoted, intolerant, and wrong. It's politically incorrect, and you shouldn't be saying it, and it lacks political decorum. This country was made of all groups of people, and if you don't like it, well, then you're just an orange bloated fat ass. We've seen her say things maybe a little bit more mild than that, but to that basic effect before. She's done it on a number of occasions. You remember when the pandemic first occurred, when Pelosi first weighed in on it, that was February of that year. What did she say? Oh, don't listen to Donald. He's just fear-mongering for political reasons. There's nothing wrong. Everything's fine. Fuck party in Chinatown. So your messaging is a little bit odd, just a little bit off. It's almost like there's a double standard here regarding who says what and when they say it and what letter they have after their name. If it's an R, then they're a bigot, a racist. You hate Chinese people, and for some reason, it couldn't be that you just hate the Chinese Communist Party and that you want to defend Chinese citizens in the United States, foreign nationals that get harassed by the fake police forces that the Chinese keep setting up under the noses, by the way, of all of the officials, and they're always oblivious to that fact until the journalistic class breaks the news, or until some dissident raises a stink on social media with a content creator. Then, when Code Pink decides to show up at your house, then all of a sudden it's go back to China. Go back to where you came from. It's almost a doppelganger of the border crisis messaging from white NIMBYist liberals. They are totally open borders. They are very woke on this issue. Come all ye faithful, give us your huddled masses, Lady Liberty and apple pie and all of that good bullshit, which never really was a thing in the first place in the United States, but I digress. But when they are bussed into their neighborhoods, when they're bussed into New York City, and New York City says, well, we can't take all these people. We're bussing them to the burbs, the little regions surrounding New York City. Or when they get bussed into Chicago, and they trickle out into the small towns and the lesser cities around Chicago because there's no room for them. Who complains loudest and longest about how it's not really their problem and those people should go stay at home down in generally Texas, of all places, or Arizona? Oh, yeah. The middle and upper middle class white liberal NIMBYists. You remember Martha's Vineyard when DeSantis bussed migrants there. For 48 hours, they had some diversity in Martha's Vineyard, and it wasn't goddamn lily white. And they made him sleep in the church, despite the fact that the average home there has like 8 fucking bedrooms or something like that. Oh, I can spare some clothes, and hey, I made a charcuterie for the migrants. Look at how woke I am. And it was almost like for a brief moment, the upper middle class and above, because that's the only people who can afford Martha's Vineyard, unless they're living in a pod. They were sort of competing with each other to be woke. But when it came nighttime, when the sun went down, so that they couldn't see those migrants because they're, a shade darker than themselves. They're blue-blooded selves. What did they do? Not one of them opened up their homes. No, they slept in the church. Similar to Nancy Pelosi. She loves protests and shit like that, especially when people are burning businesses down, predominantly black-owned businesses, ironically in some cases. And it's never an insurrection when the White House is put onto a blackout mode, onto a lockdown mode, because the Secret Service is sparring with thousands of people wielding 2x4s right outside of the security fence. No, that's not an insurrection. She had nothing but admiration for it and said, well, people have a legitimate grievance. Donald Trump is stacking the Supreme Court. But don't come up her driveway. Boy, oh boy, she's become the crazy old lady who sits on her porch and yells at the neighbor's kids. They say she doesn't care if things get fucked up the next town over. She only cares about her own little neighborhood, her own little insular piece of paradise with her $10,000 refrigerator, freezer systems, and her $50 a goddamn pint ice cream and shit like that, and her stock portfolio that is so carefully and well managed. It's amazing how she constantly manages to beat the odds within Wall Street business dealing. And do you know how much money she's made from that? It's a lot more than her congressional salary, so Nancy Pelosi can drink a glass of warm piss for all I care. That's about all. Peace out.